So let's talk about the main problem that we have in the hip with cycling. And a huge part of that has to do with the fact that we are actually going towards a huge end of range of motion when we bike. So when you're on a bike, even if we're entirely upright, one of the things that we get is constant hip flexion without our hip ever returning back to neutral or even past that into extension. So our knees are constantly coming up towards our face without ever going the other direction. One of the things that this does over and over again is it gets us to do a lot of hip flexor work without doing nearly enough glute work. And on top of that, it tends to irritate a lot of the things in the front of our hip. So the vast majority of people who are going to get problems on a bike, it's almost always going to be from them coming up and in and compressing a lot in the front of their hip, and they tend to get stuck in that position. One of the things I've seen with quite a few cyclists over the years is that they actually get really comfortable in that position, but then other positions become uncomfortable because they spend so many hours in that one. So if you end up down here all the time in this little flexed position, it actually becomes harder for you to do something like run. So a lot of the time, people who are good on a bike aren't very good at running, and vice versa, because they can work against each other. But one of the things that we want to work on if you're a cyclist and you have hip problems is making sure we open the hips up, get them into those other ranges of motion, and do it frequently just to make sure that we're counteracting all the hours we're spending flexing our hips. The first thing that we're going to go over is an activated hip flexor stretch. So I'm just using a yoga block for this purely because it helps me get a little bit of a better stretch. You don't have to use a yoga block, you can just do it straight on the ground. But what we're going to do is we're going to place a back leg on the yoga block, and I want you to get into a somewhat upright position. So one of the reasons I want you to do this is because I want you to be able to really flex this glute. I want you to be able to squeeze that butt cheek. So for a lot of people, it doesn't actually take much to get a really good hip flexor stretch. Even just being in this position, getting upright and flexing your butt cheek, a lot of people will feel a big stretch into the front of their hip. However, if you have mobile enough hips or that doesn't cause much of a stretch for you, one of the things that you can do is spread your front foot a little further away. You can flex your abs, not hard, just keep them a little bit stiff. Flex your butt cheek, put your hands on your front leg, and then slide your way forward. Most people are going to get a really big hip stretch with that. One of the things that I tend to see happen a lot with hip flexor stretches is that people do them really loose, and it looks like a big stretch, but it's not doing much. So they'll do something like this, or they'll just lean backwards. So what I want you to do is to keep your pelvis in place and really help open the hip up with your own muscle by keeping your abs tight, flexing your butt cheeks, and then sliding yourself forward, because that's what's really going to open this whole thing up. So you can do that daily, especially if you have a seated job or if you're on a bike a lot. It's going to help to really open things up.